This is Chaz Estrada with True Heat Solutions out in Southern California, and you're listening to the world's #1 pest control training podcast, the Pest Geek Podcast, with Frank Hernandez.
By special request, we're going to be discussing fleas, all on this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek Podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez, here every day discussing all things pest. Hey, we're going to be discussing fleas today, and we got a pretty good episode on that. But I wanted to thank all of you for listening every week, helping us be the success that we are. All of you that are out there listening faithfully on a weekly basis. Now you're listening on a daily basis, and we're getting a lot of feedback. People are loving the show. They're loving what we're doing. They really do appreciate what we put out and the effort we put into this podcast. So I wanted to thank you for that and remind you that you can always comment on this podcast. We've got a platform for that. It's the Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook. When we put up the podcast, you're welcome to comment on it. And there's also the Facebook page on there that it also comes out on. Twitter, we put it out on Twitter. We put it out on, we also got now a new YouTube channel and the website that we're currently working on to make a better experience for you. But all this is available from the Pest Geek Podcast. We're working to be the #1 free pest control training podcast in the world. And we're going to live up to that standard. So we thank you. Thank you for listening. And now I want to just bring on Jeff to talk about fleas. Hey, Jeff, take it away.
Thank you, Frank. Once again, folks, this is Jeff McGovern, the Pest Coach. I got an email last week from Ivan Costa, and apparently Ivan is an avid listener to the Pest Geek Podcast. And he was asking about a couple of pests, fleas and webbing clothes moths. Well, let's take a look at fleas in this particular case. And by the way, Ivan, in reading through your email, I see that you're a happy user of the Exacticide duster from Technicide, a superb piece of equipment. And frankly, in your marketplace, sir, you're going to be taking work away from the folks that do not have that fine piece of equipment for applying dust. But to talk about fleas just a little bit, most of the time, at least here in the United States, if an animal has fleas in somebody's house, fair to middling chance it's probably a cat flea. And of course, to dog owners, that's why how dare the cats do that to us. But it just so happens that that particular flea, the cat flea, is the one that seems to bother cats and dogs most of the time. And of course, there are other species, and we need to take the time, if we possibly can, to get the identification done properly. But in most cases, if we have a pet involved, we're probably dealing with a cat flea. And the issue comes into play because human beings get real concerned about the health and well-being of their pets. And frankly, they're kind of like kids. And so they don't want those creatures to be uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form. And frankly, no matter how old that cat or that dog gets, they're always going to be somebody's baby. And so they're well taken care of, and we do not want them suffering from fleas because they are absolutely miserable. And particularly as the warmer months come upon us, they're even more miserable. They don't like it, and they're not our best friend when that's going on. Now, as far as the creature themselves, they're relatively easy for us to handle today. When I first started in the pest control business, we used the good old B&G, and we had it filled up with some sort of magical elixir, and we hosed everything down with that in an attempt to try and deal with this insect. And in a lot of cases, we were pretty successful. And then as time wore on, we got things that were less and less odor. There was the infamous Dursban LO that we used a lot for fleas. But there was a bit of a problem there because it seemed like if you got Dursban LO on some carpet dyes, it turned things red-blue. For some reason, people just didn't like that. They didn't like the pest control operator coming into their home and, well, acting like an interior decorator. So flea control was always a little dicey. But there was a product a number of years ago that really did the job on fleas and just smacked them silly. And to this day, it's a very, very successful product for that. And that, of course, is Precor 2000, or I believe now we're calling it Precor 2000 Plus. The Precor 2000 Plus probably has some enhancements the original version did not have. But to back off for a moment, when we're going into a situation with fleas, obviously we have people under distress. When I first started doing this work back in the early 70s, fleas got the reaction from people that bed bugs are getting now. And I had bed bug accounts back then, and nobody seemed to worry about it. But for some reason, we all had big issues with fleas. Now, the number one thing to do is investigate and find out really what's going on inside that house or even that business if you're dealing with an office or something like that. Go through, do the assessment, find out where pets spend their time and also where people spend their time. And certainly one of the most important things we have to do, as we do similar with bed bugs, we need to break up clutter. We need to vacuum thoroughly, and we may indeed have some items that need to be washed because obviously the washing and drying is going to devastate the fleas completely anyway. We also have to be sure that there's some type of attention paid to the pet involved because in most cases we do have a pet involved. So there's veterinary visits and that type of thing, and there may even be coordination with work done at the vet and the services that we provide. The other thing, too, is back when we first were doing this before Precor 2000, we had to be careful because sometimes the materials we fan sprayed onto the carpeting and such could cause an issue with the animal if the animal was given certain types of products from the veterinarian. Veterinarian product wouldn't bother the animal, but in combination to what we had done to the structure, the animal could become ill and possibly even die. And of course, that would be a major tragedy for anyone involved. But getting back to that investigative process, one tool that I find very handy for fleas today to protect me is that mattress safe, body safe suit. It's lightweight. You can slip it on over your uniform. I recommend using the light color one because when you go in with that white suit on, aside from the fact you're going to look like a giant Q-tip, you are going to be comfortable, by the way, because it breathes really well. But you're going to notice all these specks showing up all over you sometimes, and that may help you figure out where the fleas really are. And also it keeps them off of you so you don't get all chewed up. I know back in the old days doing this, we always tucked our pants into our socks and hoped for the best. But that body-safe suit does a nice job of keeping us from toting fleas all over the place because when you get done with the investigative portion, just go ahead and put it in this laundry bag and launder it when you get back to the house. Now, the other thing you'll find, too, is if someone's been on vacation, they've been away for a little while, the fleas are reproducing, life is good, but you know what? The restaurant hadn't been open for a couple of weeks. And oh my goodness, when they come home, they're gonna get hammered. And that's normally when we get the calls. So that suit's real handy to go in that particular situation. I recommend thoroughly vacuuming, as I said earlier, everything first. We used to leave that to the customer. Please vacuum thoroughly before the PMP or pest control operator arrives. Well, you know what? That didn't always happen. And we'd get there, we'd see the vacuum sitting in the corner, and by God, it had never been plugged in. Recommend using a vacuum that we possess. Go ahead and charge for the vacuuming service. I would say they need to get the clutter out of the way, pick up all the toys and that type of thing and give us a straight shot at everything. But get all the vacuuming done properly and charge for it. Recommend using an Atrix vacuum, particularly the cartridge models like the Atrix Green Supreme, because when you are finished, you can throw the cartridge away. Because one way of reinfestation, particularly if a client does this, is they don't throw the vacuum bag away. And so bad things happen and we get fleas back again. And everything needs to be coordinated properly. So the vacuum is done, the servicing is done. Pay attention to the label. If there's a particular notification on there about time to stay out, go ahead and abide by that. Now, what you'll find with the Precor 2000 or 2000 plus is you need to move at a pretty good clip with this stuff. One of the problems we found when the product first came out, the 2000 always stood for 2,000 square feet of application surface. And I really remember the training sessions we had with this stuff. And we'd have cans of product and we're showing technicians how to use it. And we couldn't get these guys out of a 10 by 10 bedroom. And they needed to use that can for 2,000 square feet. So you need to pay attention to what you're doing and understand that more is not better. Because in that Precor 2000, you're going to have an adulticide that's going to kill the insect on contact. But more importantly, you're going to have the Precor. And what that's going to do is growth regulator activity on the insect. And essentially what happens in the case of an egg, for example, the respiration that the egg has will bring the material in, and the material will destroy the cellular makeup of what would have formed the body of the flea. That's always how it's been explained to me by the manufacturer. All I know is the product is outrageously effective and does a very, very good job. Now, you can also make applications with dry materials, once again following the label. As I said earlier, the gentleman who made this email, Ivan, is using an Exacticide. If you're going to be applying dry materials for one reason or another for fleas, that is probably the best way to do it because you get good distribution. The other thing that the folks at Technicide make is an actual carpet applicator. So if you need to use that type of a treatment method, you can, and you'll get a good distribution of the product down into the fibrous areas of the carpet. Now, with fleas, you may have some follow-ups. That's perfectly okay. It's not going to be something along the lines of what we get into with bed bugs, and that's actually because fleas haven't gotten the bad press that bed bugs have. So the panic that we used to see with fleas has pretty much died down, and folks react to it as a normal everyday thing. They have a pet, they need to get the pet treated, pest control operator comes out. Precor 2000 has made this outrageously simple, and we go ahead and perform the service and we're good to go. Keep in mind the type of pet they have, because a dog may be limited to the floor and a little bit of furniture. If you have a cat in that house, you got a flying critter. I have cats in my own house, and we have 12-foot ceilings, and sometimes the cats manage to get up near the ceiling on a piece of furniture. Everywhere that animal goes, it's depositing flea eggs. So if you have a cat situation you're dealing with, it may get a bit more complicated. Also, you might be dealing with rats and mice and a flea situation associated with them. You have other issues there as well. But bottom line, you need to make a careful investigation, find out what's really going on in the home or the facility. And certainly if we have an animal that's under the people's control, we need to make sure that animal is also free of fleas and undergoing some type of treatment in coordination with the work that we're doing. If you have anything else that you want to ask about this, certainly drop me an email or contact Frank, and we'll go ahead and cover it. But in a nutshell, that's kind of a bit of information on fleas. I hope you like it, and now I'll turn it back to Frank. Ivan, thank you very much, and have a good day out there on the road.
Thanks, Jeff, for a great podcast. Reminding the folks, hey, join us again tomorrow. You have a pestacular day.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.